The message arrived at exactly midnight, Earth Standard Time. Admiral stood on the bridge of the battleship Horizon, staring at the holographic display floating before him. The blue light of the transmission cast strange shadows across his weathered face. He was 53 years old, and he had spent 30 of those years serving in the Terran fleet. He had seen many things in his long career. He had watched friends die in the cold darkness of space. He had commanded ships through battles that should have killed him 10 times over. But he had never seen anything like this. The message bore the official seal of the Galactic Council, a circle of 47 stars representing the spacefaring species that ruled the known galaxy. Humanity was the youngest of these species. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 83 years ago. In the grand scale of galactic civilization, humans were newborns stumbling into a room full of ancient giants. And now, those giants were making demands. Read the message again, his jaw tightening with each word. The Galactic Council, acting on behalf of the Empire, formally demanded that the United Terran Federation surrender 60% of its outer colony territories. These territories contained vast mineral deposits that humanity had spent decades developing. Millions of human colonists lived there. Entire cities had been built from nothing. The Council called this demand fair reparations for humanity's aggressive expansion into space. Closed his eyes. He remembered the first contact war like it was yesterday. He had been a young captain then, commanding a small destroyer on patrol near the Mars orbital station. They had come without warning. They had not sent diplomats or messengers. They had sent warships. 200 million people died in the first week of that war. Earth's moon was by orbital bombardment. The colony on Titan was completely destroyed. Humanity had no real fleet back then, no experience fighting in space. They were children being slaughtered by wolves. But humans did not surrender. They never did. The war lasted 4 years. Humanity lost nearly 500 million people. But slowly, painfully, they learned to fight back. They built ships faster than anyone thought possible. They developed weapons that surprised even the... In the end, they grew tired of the cost and grumbling about the troublesome apes who refused to die quietly. That was 30 years ago. And now, those same wanted humanity to hand over their hard-earned colonies as reparations for daring to exist. Forwarded the message to Earth and prepared for the storm that was coming. On the other side of the solar system, Ambassador Park received the same message in her office on Luna Station. She was 41 years old, tall and thin, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Before becoming a diplomat, she had served as an intelligence officer during the final years of the First Contact War. She knew how aliens thought. More importantly, she knew how they lied. She read the Council's demands 3 times, her expression growing colder with each reading. The document was filled with fancy words and formal language, but the meaning was simple. They wanted to steal from humanity, and they wanted the other species to help them do it. They had dressed up their theft in legal terms and diplomatic courtesy, but it was still theft. Set down the document and looked out her window at the Earth hanging in the black sky. She could see the scars on the planet's surface even from here. The Great Pacific Crater, where a bombardment had vaporized 3 island nations. The dark patches in North America where cities had once stood. Her own parents had died in those attacks. She had been 12 years old. She picked up her communicator and called the Terran High Council. It was time for humanity to decide its fate. The High Council chamber in Geneva was the most secure room on Earth. It sat deep underground, protected by layers of concrete, steel, and energy shields. The leaders of humanity gathered here whenever the fate of their species hung in the balance. President Han sat at the head of the long table, listening as her advisors argued. She was 60 years old, with hair cut short, and a face lined by decades of hard decisions. Before becoming president, she had commanded a battalion of ground troops during the First Contact War. She still walked with a slight limp from a wound she had received defending the Seoul evacuation zone. Defense Minister was the first to speak. He was a large man with a booming voice and hands that had once operated heavy weapons. "This is an insult," he said, slamming his fist on the table. "They want us to give up everything our people built, everything our people died for. And for what? Because they are too lazy to develop their own territories." Foreign Minister raised her hand. She was small and soft-spoken, but her mind was razor-sharp. "We must consider our position carefully," she said. "They have the largest fleet in the galaxy. The Council has supported them for thousands of years. If we refuse their demands, we will face them alone. No one will help us." "No one helped us during the First Contact War either," replied. "We survived." "We barely survived," said. "And we lost hundreds of millions of people. Can we afford to lose more?" The debate continued for hours. Some advisors suggested partial compliance, giving up some territories to satisfy the Council. Others proposed diplomatic delays, buying time while humanity built more ships. A few suggested reaching out to other species for secret alliances. President Han listened to all of them without speaking. She let every voice be heard, every argument be made. She was not the kind of leader who ignored her advisors. But she had already made her decision. She had made it the moment she read the Council's demands. When the room finally fell silent, she stood up. Everyone turned to look at her. "I have heard your arguments," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "You speak of diplomacy and compromise. You speak of survival and caution. These are wise words. I respect them." She paused and looked around the table. "But I have a question for all of you. 30 years ago, they attacked us without warning. They killed our families. They burned our cities. They tried to break our spirit." Her eyes hardened. "Did negotiation save us then? Did compromise stop the bombardment? Did caution bring back the dead?" No one answered. The silence was heavy. "We survived because we fought," Han continued. "We survived because we refused to kneel. We survived because they learned that humans do not break easily." She placed both hands on the table and leaned forward. "I will not teach them a different lesson now." Nodded slowly. "What are your orders, Madam President?" Han straightened and looked toward the window, toward the sky she could not see from this underground room. "Tell the Council we refuse their demands, all of them, every single word." She turned back to face her ministers. "And tell Admiral to prepare the fleet. If they want war, we will give them a war they will never forget." The message was sent within the hour. Across the galaxy on station, the Galactic Council received humanity's response. The High Delegate, Lord, read it with growing disbelief. The humans had refused, not partially, not with conditions. They had rejected everything. For the first time in 4,000 years, a species had said no to the Empire. Lord set down the message and began to laugh. These foolish apes had just signed their own death warrant. He would crush them personally and enjoy every moment of it. He did not know that he was about to learn a lesson that would change the galaxy forever. He did not know that he should be afraid. Station floated in the darkness between stars, far from any sun or planet. It was the largest structure ever built by living creatures. The station was home to the Galactic Council, where representatives from 47 species met to decide the fate of civilizations. Wars were started here. Peace treaties were signed here. Entire species had risen and fallen based on decisions made in these halls. Ambassador Park's shuttle approached the station slowly. Through the small window, she could see the massive structure growing larger and larger. It was shaped like a great wheel, spinning gently to create artificial gravity. Lights glittered across its surface like stars brought down from the sky. She had been here many times before. She knew every corridor, every chamber, every hidden corner where deals were made in whispers. She knew which species could be trusted and which ones would stab you the moment your back was turned. She knew the games that were played in this place. Today, she was not here to play games. The shuttle docked and stepped out alone. She had been offered guards, advisors, assistants. She had refused them all. What she was about to do required no help. It required only courage. The council chamber was located at the very center of the station. It was a vast circular room designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Seats rose in tiers around a central platform, filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Strange faces looked down from every direction. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no faces at all, only clusters of sensory organs that detected light and sound in ways humans could not imagine. At the highest point sat the delegation, led by Lord himself. Lord was ancient even by standards. He had lived for nearly 3,000 years, serving the Empire in various roles before becoming High Delegate. His skin was pale, stretched tight over a skull that was longer and narrower than a human's. His eyes were completely black, like pools of oil reflecting no light. When he smiled, rows of small, sharp teeth became visible. He was smiling now as entered the chamber. The room fell silent. Every eye, every sensor, every attention turned to the small human woman walking toward the central platform. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space. She wore a simple black uniform with no decorations, no medals, no symbols of rank, just the flag of Earth on her shoulder. She stopped at the center of the platform and looked up at the assembled representatives. Lord spoke first. His voice was smooth and cold like ice sliding across stone. Ambassador Park, how kind of you to attend in person. I had expected your species would send their response through diplomatic channels, perhaps with an apology for the delay. Low laughter rippled through the chamber. Many species found humans amusing. They were so young, so small, so weak compared to the great powers of the galaxy. What could they possibly do against the might of the Empire? Did not react to the laughter. Her face remained calm, her eyes steady. I am here to deliver the response of the United Terran Federation personally, she said. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber, amplified by the station's systems. Some messages are too important for written words. Lord raised one thin eyebrow. Indeed, then please, Ambassador, enlighten us. What does humanity have to say about the Council's generous offer? Took a deep breath. In this moment she was not just one woman. She was the voice of 12 billion humans spread across a dozen worlds. She carried their hopes, their fears, their anger, their pride. She carried the memory of 200 million dead. She would not fail them. The United Terran Federation formally rejects the Council's demands, she said clearly. All of them, without exception, without negotiation, without compromise. The chamber went completely silent. For a long moment no one moved, no one spoke. It was as if time itself had stopped. Then Lord began to laugh. Rejects? He leaned forward in his seat, his black eyes glittering with amusement. I do not think you understand your position, human. This is not a request. This is not a suggestion. The Council has spoken. The Empire has spoken. You will comply or you will face the consequences. We understand our position perfectly, replied. We understand that you are trying to steal what belongs to us. We understand that you expect us to bow down and accept this theft because you are stronger than we are. She took a step forward, and somehow, despite her small size, she seemed to grow larger. But we also understand something that you have forgotten. Strength is not only measured in ships and weapons, it is measured in will, in spirit, in the refusal to kneel before tyrants. Her voice rose. They attacked us 30 years ago. You killed our families. You burned our cities. You tried to break us. She pointed directly at Lord. You failed. The silence in the chamber was absolute. No one had ever spoken to the like this. No one had ever dared. Lord's smile faded. His eyes narrowed. Careful, human. Words have consequences. So do actions, shot back. Your actions 30 years ago taught us an important lesson. We learned that the galaxy is full of predators who will take everything from those too weak to resist. We learned that no one will save us but ourselves. We learned that survival means being strong enough to make predators think twice. She paused and looked around the chamber at all the watching faces. We are stronger now, much stronger, and we will not give up a single meter of our territory, not one colony, not one asteroid, not one grain of sand. Her voice dropped to something cold and deadly. If your fleet crosses into Terran space, we will destroy it. If your soldiers land on our worlds, we will bury them there. If you want war, Lord, you will have it. And I promise you this, it will cost you more than you can imagine. Lord rose to his feet, his face twisted with rage. You dare threaten the Empire. You are insects. Your entire species has existed for barely a blink of cosmic time. We ruled 1,000 worlds while your ancestors were crawling in the mud. And yet we still beat you, said quietly. 30 years ago, with barely any ships and no experience, we fought your invasion to a standstill. Imagine what we can do now. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded that the council take immediate action against humanity. Others whispered among themselves, watching the confrontation with calculating eyes. A few species that had suffered under rule for centuries looked at the human ambassador with something that might have been hope. Lord raised his hand for silence. The chamber slowly quieted. Very well, he said. His voice was calm again, but there was something dangerous beneath the surface. You have made your choice, human. You have chosen extinction. He smiled that terrible smile with all his sharp little teeth. The Grand Armada will mobilize within the week. 3,000 warships will descend upon your pathetic worlds. Your colonies will burn. Your cities will fall. And when the last human is dead, the galaxy will remember you as a foolish species that did not know its place. Meta's gaze without flinching. The galaxy will remember us, she agreed, but not the way you think. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. Every representative watched her go, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. At the door, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. One more thing, Lord. The humans who fought you 30 years ago were desperate and unprepared. They were survivors, doing whatever they could to stay alive. Her eyes were hard as iron. The humans who will fight you now have spent 30 years preparing for this moment. We have built ships designed specifically to kill. We have trained soldiers who dream of nothing but revenge. We have developed weapons you have never seen and cannot imagine. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. You wanted to make an example of us. You wanted to show the galaxy what happens to species that defy the Empire. She turned to face him fully one last time. Congratulations. You are about to become the example instead. She walked out of the chamber and did not look back. Behind her, panic erupted among the council representatives. Species that had been silent for centuries suddenly found their voices. Old alliances cracked. New fears were born. The carefully maintained order of the galaxy trembled on the edge of something unprecedented. Lord stood frozen in his place, his mind racing. He had expected the humans to negotiate, to bargain, to beg. That was what every species did when facing power. But these humans were different. These humans were not afraid. For the first time in his long, long life, Lord felt a tiny seed of doubt take root in his chest. He crushed it ruthlessly and began issuing orders for the fleet to mobilize. He would destroy these arrogant apes. He would make them regret their defiance. He would teach the entire galaxy a lesson written in human blood. He did not know that the lesson the galaxy was about to learn would be very different from the one he intended to teach. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species, every world, every station knew what had happened in the council chamber. A young species called humanity had looked the Empire in the eye and said no. On 100 different worlds, beings of all shapes and sizes watched the recordings of Ambassador Park's speech. They saw her stand alone before the mightiest power in the galaxy. They heard her voice, steady and unafraid. They watched Lord's face twist with fury. Some laughed at the foolish humans who had just condemned themselves to death. Others shook their heads at such stupidity. A few, however, felt something they had not felt in a very long time, something that had been beaten out of them by centuries of domination. They felt hope. On the Grand Armada began to assemble. 3,000 warships gathered in orbit, blocking out the stars. Each ship was massive, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. The smallest of them was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Lord stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. It was the largest warship in the known galaxy, a mountain of metal and fury that had destroyed entire civilizations. He watched his fleet gather and felt satisfaction warm his ancient heart. The humans had made their choice. Now they would face the consequences. He gave the order to move toward Terran space. The Armada began its journey, a wave of destruction that would wash over humanity and leave nothing behind. On Earth, the response was very different from what they expected. There was no panic. There was no chaos. There were no riots in the streets or masses of refugees fleeing to nowhere. Instead, something remarkable happened. Humanity prepared for war. In factories across a dozen worlds, machines that had been building civilian goods suddenly switched to military production. Assembly lines that made personal vehicles now produced armored transports. Chemical plants that manufactured medicine began creating explosives. Every shipyard, every workshop, every garage with a welder became part of the war effort. The transformation happened almost overnight. It was as if humanity had been waiting for this moment, practicing for it in secret. In a way, they had been. After the First Contact War, the Terran government had created a plan. They called it the contingency. If the ever returned, if humanity ever faced extinction again, the entire civilization would convert to total war in less than 48 hours. Every factory had secondary blueprints hidden in their computers. Every worker had received basic military training. Every ship, even civilian transports, had hidden where weapons could be installed. For 30 years, humanity had smiled at the galaxy and pretended to be weak and harmless. Behind that smile, they had been preparing for the day they would have to fight again. That day had come. Admiral stood on the bridge of the horizon, watching the reports flood in from across Terran space. Volunteers were signing up by the millions. Veterans who had fought in the First Contact War were coming out of retirement, haired but eager for another chance at the enemy. Young people who had grown up on stories of the war were finally getting their opportunity to prove themselves. His second-in-command, commander, approached with a tablet in his hand. Admiral, the latest fleet count. We have 412 combat-ready vessels. Another 60 are completing final preparations and will be ready within the week. Nodded slowly, and the 3,000, sir, maybe more. Intelligence suggests they may be pulling ships from other sectors as well. The numbers were grim, nearly 7 to 1. In any normal calculation, those odds meant certain defeat. But had not survived the First Contact War by thinking normally. What about the preparations? He asked. Allowed himself a small smile. Complete, Admiral. We've seeded over 15,000 mines along the corridor. They will never expect it. No one in galactic history has ever mined a hyperspace route. Because it's considered suicidal and pointless, said, which is exactly why we did it. The corridor was the only stable hyperspace route into Terran space. Faster-than-light travel required specific pathways through the strange dimensions that ships used to cross vast distances. Outside these pathways, hyperspace was unstable and deadly. Ships that tried to navigate it randomly simply vanished, never to be seen again. This meant that any fleet attacking humanity had to come through, and humanity had spent months turning that corridor into a death trap. Across Terran space, other preparations were. Captain Lee checked her ship one final time. The Silent Blade was a stealth destroyer, one of the few in the Terran fleet. It was small, fast, and nearly invisible to enemy sensors. More importantly, it carried a crew of specialists trained for operations behind enemy lines. Was 35 years old, tall and lean, with quick eyes and quicker reflexes. She had joined the military at 18, driven by memories of watching her older brother leave for the first contact war and never come back. Now she had a chance to strike at the empire that had taken him from her. Her orders had come directly from Admiral. While the main fleet held the line her strike team would slip behind enemy lines. Their targets were the supply stations and communication hubs. Without supplies, the armada would starve. Without communications, they would lose coordination. It was a dangerous mission. The chances of survival were not good. Smiled when she read the orders. This was exactly what she had been waiting for. "Crew of the Silent Blade," she announced over the ship's speakers. "We have our mission. We're going hunting behind enemy lines. The odds are bad. The danger is real. Many of us may not come back." She paused and looked around at her crew, at the determined faces watching her. "But our brothers and sisters will be fighting they're counting on us to give them an edge. They're counting on us to hit the enemy where it hurts." Her voice hardened. "They think they can walk into our space and take what they want. They think we're weak. They think we'll break." She smiled coldly. "Let's show them how wrong they are." The crew cheered. Back on Earth, President Han addressed the nation. Her image appeared on every screen, every device, every public display across the planet and beyond. "Citizens of the United Terran Federation," she began. "You have heard the news. The Empire has threatened us with destruction. They believe that because they are larger and older, they have the right to take what is ours. They believe that we will surrender rather than fight." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "They are wrong." Her voice grew stronger. 30 years ago, we faced these same enemies. We were unprepared. We were weak. We had no experience and few ships, and yet we survived. We survived because humans do not surrender. We survived because when you back us into a corner, we fight harder. We survived because our spirit cannot be broken by bombs or threats or impossible odds. Behind her, images appeared on the screen. The rebuilt cities, the restored colonies, the massive shipyards and factories that had grown from the ashes of war. "Look at what we have built since then. Look at what we have accomplished. We turned our tragedy into strength. We turned our fear into determination. We created a civilization that will not kneel before tyrants." Her expression hardened. "Now they are coming again. They think they will find the same frightened species they attacked 30 years ago. They think they will sweep through our defenses and crush us without effort." She leaned forward. "They will find something very different. They will find a people who have spent 3 decades preparing for this moment. They will find ships built specifically to kill them. They will find soldiers who have trained all their lives for this fight. They will find a species that is done being afraid." The images behind her changed to show the Terran fleet assembling, row after row of warships with their weapons gleaming. "The enemy expects us to beg for mercy. They expect us to negotiate. They expect us to break." Her voice rose to fill the silence. "We will do none of these things. We will fight. We will make them pay for every meter they try to take. We will show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity." She stood straight and proud. "To our enemies, I have only this to say: you wanted a war. You will have one. And when it is over, the universe will remember that humans do not surrender. Humans do not kneel. Humans fight." She raised her fist. "For Earth, for humanity, for everyone we lost, we will not be broken." Across 12 worlds, billions of humans watched their president speak, and something powerful moved through them. Not fear, not despair, something much more dangerous. Determination. The factories worked around the clock, the ships launched from their docks, the soldiers marched to their stations. Humanity was going to war. And this time they were ready. The stars disappeared. One moment the space around the corridor was empty and silent. The next moment, the Grand Armada emerged from hyperspace like a wall of death stretching across the void. 3,000 warships hung in the darkness, their hulls gleaming with weapons, their engines burning with hungry fire. Lord stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching his fleet take position. It was the largest armada that had assembled in 800 years, enough firepower to crack a planet in half, enough soldiers to occupy a dozen worlds. Against them, the human fleet looked like toys. Admiral studied the enemy on his tactical display. 400 Terran ships faced 3,000 vessels. His largest battleship was smaller than this medium cruisers. On paper, this battle was already over. But battles were not fought on paper. All ships hold position, ordered. His voice was calm, almost relaxed. Wait for my command. Commander stood beside him, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. He was not afraid of dying. He was afraid of failing. Admiral, he said quietly, they're opening a communication channel. Nodded, put it through. Lord's face appeared on the main screen. His black eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. Admiral, he said, I offer you one final chance. Surrender now and your crew will be spared. Continue this foolish resistance and every human in this sector will die screaming. Looked at the alien face on his screen. He thought about all the friends he had lost in the First Contact War. He thought about the cities that had burned. He thought about the 200 million people who had died because they wanted to test humanity's strength. Lord, he replied, you have entered sovereign Terran space with hostile intentions. This is your only warning. Turn your fleet around and leave. Now. Laughed, you have 400 ships. I have 3,000. Your defiance is admirable but meaningless. Smiled, it was not a pleasant smile. You counted our ships, he said. You didn't count our minds. Laughter stopped. What did you say? Fire control, said calmly, turning away from the screen. Detonate the field. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the corridor exploded. 15,000 stealth mines, seeded over months by Terran ships, activated simultaneously. They had been hidden in the debris clouds and asteroid fields that dotted the corridor, invisible to sensors. Now they came alive with terrible purpose. The front lines of the Armada vanished in fire. 600 ships were destroyed in the first 10 seconds. Massive explosions tore through the formation as mines found their targets. Ships that had expected to cruise easily into human space were suddenly torn apart from all directions. The disciplined fleet became a chaos of debris and flames. Lord gripped the arms of his command chair, his face pale with shock. This was impossible. No one had ever mined a hyperspace corridor. The strategy was considered suicidal, pointless, the act of desperate fools. But humans were desperate fools, and they had just killed 1 in 5 of his ships in less than a minute. All ships full advance, he roared, destroy them. The remaining fleet surged forward, wounded but still vastly superior in numbers. 2,400 warships against 400. The odds were still impossible. Admiral watched them come. All ships, he said, attack. The Terran fleet charged directly into the enemy formation. This was not how space battles were supposed to be fought. Standard doctrine called for careful maneuvering, long-range bombardment, the gradual wearing down of enemy forces. Fighting at close range was chaotic and costly. But humans had learned something during the First Contact War. They were excellent at long-range combat. Their sensors were better. Their weapons had longer reach. At a distance, ships would pick off Terran vessels one by one. Up close, however, things were different. Up close, what mattered was courage, aggression, the willingness to take damage in order to deal damage, the ability to look death in the face and keep firing. These were human specialties. The two fleets collided like waves smashing against rocks. Energy beams cut through the darkness. Missiles exploded against shields. Ships rammed into each other in desperate suicide attacks. The Terran destroyers swarmed the larger cruisers like wolves attacking elephants. They were too small to damage the enemy on their own, but they targeted engines and weapon ports, crippling the bigger ships so that Terran battleships could finish them off. Fighter squadrons dove into the gaps between enemy vessels, too fast and too small for the defensive systems to track. They planted explosives on critical systems and fled before the enemy could react. One Terran captain, his ship crippled and unable to retreat, ordered full engine power and crashed directly into a carrier. Both ships exploded in a fireball visible from 1,000 kilometers away. Another captain, her weapons destroyed, maneuvered her dying ship to shield a Terran hospital vessel from enemy fire. She held position until the hospital ship escaped, then exploded under concentrated bombardment. Lord watched these human tactics with growing horror. What kind of species threw away their own lives so readily? What kind of creatures saw death as an acceptable trade for damaging their enemies? They were used to opponents who valued self-preservation, who retreated when damaged, who surrendered when outnumbered. Humans did none of these things. Behind the battle lines, Captain Lee and the Silent Blade emerged from their hiding place. The chaos of combat had drawn all attention to the main fight. No one noticed the small stealth destroyer slipping past the enemy formation. "First target in range," reported her weapons officer. Looked at the supply station ahead of them. It was lightly defended, its guards pulled away to join the main battle. "Fire all missiles," she ordered, then move to the next target. The Silent Blade struck like a ghost. By the time they realized they were under attack, the supply station was already a cloud of debris. Ship vanished back into the shadows before anyone could respond. Over the next 3 hours, her strike team destroyed 3 supply stations and the main communications hub. Without supplies, the Armada would run out of fuel and ammunition. Without communications, they could not coordinate their forces. The battle that should have been a one-sided massacre became something very different. Admiral stood on the bridge of the horizon, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. His ship had taken heavy damage. Entire sections were open to space. Half his weapons were offline. He didn't care, he was still fighting. "Status report," he demanded. Commander, his uniform torn and burned, checked his console. "We've lost 290 ships, Admiral. They have lost approximately 1,800. He paused, disbelief creeping into his voice. "They're wavering. Their formation is breaking." Looked at the tactical display. It was true. The fleet, so confident just hours ago, was falling apart. Ships were retreating without orders. Some were fleeing at full speed, abandoning their comrades. Humans had not just held the line. They had broken the enemy. Admiral said, "Lord's flagship is retreating." Watched the Eternal Dominion turn and flee. The most powerful warship in the galaxy was running from the fight. He thought about pursuing, about finishing what they had started, but his fleet was exhausted, damaged, barely holding together. They had done enough. "Let them go," he said quietly. "We've made our point." The remaining ships fled into hyperspace. The humans let them go, too tired to chase, too bloodied to celebrate. Admiral looked around the ruined bridge of his ship. He thought about the 290 vessels they had lost, the thousands of men and women who had died today. "Commander," he said. "Yes, Admiral." "Send a message to Earth. Tell them." He paused, searching for the right words. "Tell them they will think twice before threatening humanity again." Nodded, a fierce pride burning in his eyes. "Yes, Admiral, I'll send it immediately." Across Terran space, the news spread faster than light. The Grand Armada, the mightiest fleet in the galaxy, had been broken at. 400 human ships had faced 3,001. In homes and schools and factories, humans wept and cheered and held each other tight. They had survived. Against all odds, against every expectation, they had survived. And in the cold darkness of space, surrounded by the wreckage of the battle, Admiral sat down heavily in his command chair. He was exhausted, he was wounded, he had lost too many good people today. But for the first time in 30 years, he felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt free. The recording played on every screen in the Galactic Council chamber. Every representative watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded before their eyes. They saw the mines detonate. They saw the formation shatter. They saw human ships charge into superior forces without hesitation. They saw the mighty Grand Armada flee. When the recording ended, no one spoke. The silence stretched on, heavy with the weight of what they had just witnessed. For 4,000 years, the Empire had dominated the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of species. They had crushed every rebellion. They had become so powerful that other civilizations simply accepted their rule as an unchangeable fact of the universe. Now, a species that had only discovered space travel 83 years ago had beaten them. Lord sat in his seat, his face hollow. He had lost 1,800 ships. 50,000 soldiers were dead. His flagship had fled from the battle like a frightened animal. He was ruined, he knew it, everyone knew it. But his mind was already working on damage control. He rose to his feet, summoning what remained of his dignity. "Fellow council members," he began, "what you have witnessed is a temporary setback. The humans used dishonorable tactics. They attacked our supply lines. They mined a hyperspace corridor like cowardly animals. These are not the actions of a civilized species." He looked around the chamber, seeking support. "I call upon the Council to condemn humanity's actions. I call for a unified fleet from all member species to punish these apes for their crimes against galactic order." For a moment, no one moved. In the past, when the demanded action the Council obeyed, it had always been that way. But something was different today. Something had changed. A delegate rose from the lower tiers. He was old and bent, his green skin weathered by centuries of hardship. His name was Elder, and he represented the collective. That had been conquered by the 800 years ago. There had been stripped of resources. Their people had been used as laborers and soldiers for wars. For 8 centuries, they had suffered under the Empire's boot, too weak to resist, too afraid to speak. Until now. "I have a question for Lord," said. His voice was thin and reedy, but it carried throughout the chamber. "You speak of dishonorable tactics. You speak of crimes against galactic order." He paused. Where was this concern for order when they attacked humanity 30 years ago? Where was the Council's outrage when 200 million humans died without warning? His face twisted with anger. That was different, that was. "That was conquest," interrupted. "The same conquest that I've practiced for thousands of years. You attacked a young species without provocation. You killed their children. You burned their cities. And when they somehow survived, you came back 30 years later to take what remained." He turned to face the rest of the Council. "For 8 centuries, my people have lived under chains. Every time we resisted, we stood alone. Every time we asked for help, this Council looked away." His voice grew stronger. But the humans did not look away. They did not accept these demands. They did not kneel. He pointed at the frozen image on the screen, showing the Terran fleet charging into battle. They fought against impossible odds. They fought, and they won. Elder straightened his bent back as much as he could. "The collective formally requests alliance with the United Terran Federation." The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted at each other. Some demanded that sit down. Others called for his arrest. But above the chaos, other voices began to rise. The delegation stood. They were a small, insect-like species that had been paying tribute to them for 600 years. The consortium also requests alliance with the humans, their speaker announced. Then the Dross, a reptilian species known for their mining expertise. The Dross mining guilds stand with the Terran Federation. The tall and graceful, with a reputation for neutrality that had lasted. The republics wished to open formal diplomatic relations with humanity. A species of artificial intelligences housed in mechanical bodies. The collective calculates that alliance with humanity provides optimal strategic outcomes. We request immediate negotiations. Lord watched his empire begin to crumble. Species that had cowered before them for centuries were suddenly finding their courage. The fear that had kept them obedient was fading, replaced by something new. Hope, that terrible, dangerous emotion that had destroyed empires and built civilizations. Silence screamed. I demand silence. This is treason. This is rebellion against the natural order of the galaxy. No one listened. The doors of the chamber opened, and Ambassador Park walked in. This time she was not alone. Behind her came a squad of Terran Marines in full combat armor, their weapons clearly visible. They were not here to fight. They were here to make a statement. Humanity was no longer asking for permission to exist. Walked to the central platform and looked up at the chaos swirling around her. She waited patiently until the noise began to fade. Lord, she said calmly, you wanted to make an example of humanity. You wanted to show the galaxy what happens to species that defy the Empire. She smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in it. Congratulations, you succeeded. She gestured at the delegations that had spoken in humanity's favor. The galaxy has learned an important lesson today. They have learned that they are not invincible. They have learned that courage can defeat numbers. They have learned that standing together is better than kneeling alone. She turned to address the entire council. The United Terran Federation does not seek empire. We do not wish to conquer or dominate, but we will defend ourselves. We will stand with our friends, and we will never again allow tyrants to threaten our existence. She looked directly at. You have a choice, Lord. You can continue this war. You can send another fleet and another, but each time you will lose. Each time more species will realize that you can be beaten. Each time your empire will grow weaker while your enemies grow stronger. She paused. Or you can accept that the galaxy has changed. You can recognize humanity as an equal. You can join a new order where species work together instead of living in fear. His black eyes burned with hatred, but behind the hatred there was something else, something he had never felt before. Doubt. This is not over, he hissed. The Empire has lasted for 10,000 years. We will not fall to a species that barely learned to walk upright. Nodded calmly. Perhaps, but consider this. 30 years ago we had almost nothing. Today we defeated your greatest fleet. In another 30 years, what will we be capable of? She let the question hang in the air. The future belongs to those who adapt, Lord. They can change with the galaxy, or they can be left behind by it. She turned and walked toward the door, the Marines falling into formation behind her. The United Terran Federation is open to peaceful relations with any species that wishes them. Our ambassadors will be available for discussions. At the door, she paused and looked back. But if anyone else wants to try what they tried, remember. Remember what happened to the Grand Armada. Remember that humans do not break easily. She left the chamber. The chaos that followed lasted for hours. Old alliances crumbled. New friendships formed. Species that had never dared to speak against the suddenly found their voices. By the time the session ended, the political landscape of the galaxy had changed forever. They were still powerful, but they were no longer untouchable. Other species now saw that resistance was possible. And at the center of this new order stood humanity, young, fierce, unbreakable. The galaxy would never be the same.